Welcome to the Darkling Radio. In today's chilling episode, we bring you a terrifying story. Haunted Place Horror Story. Follow Ryan, Emma, and Lucas, three friends drawn to forgotten places, as they venture into the depths of the abandoned Ashgrove House. What begins as a daring exploration quickly turns into a nightmare beyond imagination. Shadows that move on their own, whispers in empty rooms, and a presence that watches their every step. Step inside, if you dare, and discover the horrors waiting in the darkness, where the line between reality and terror is gone forever. My name is Ryan, and I've always been drawn to places that most people would avoid. Old, abandoned buildings have a strange pull on me, like they're hiding secrets waiting to be uncovered. I spend my days searching online for forgotten locations. Empty hospitals, decrepit mansions, or long-forgotten lodges swallowed by nature. That's how I found Ashgrove House. Tucked deep in the forest, it had been abandoned for over 50 years. The locals whispered about it, saying no one who stayed overnight ever returned the same. Some said people disappeared entirely. The idea terrified me. But instead of running away, I felt drawn closer. The journey there was unsettling from the start. The road narrowed as the forest thickened, the trees pressing against my car like dark sentinels. The sunlight barely reached the asphalt, leaving patches of shadow that shifted unnaturally with the wind. Even before I arrived, I noticed the silence. Birds didn't sing. There was no rustling of leaves, no wind whispering through the branches. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to arrive. My phone lost signal halfway down the road, leaving me isolated. The world outside the forest ceased to exist. When the lodge finally appeared through the trees, it took my breath away. It was enormous, rising from the earth like a skeletal relic. Its once grand facade was now crumbling. Vines snaked across its walls, forcing their way through broken windows, and the roof sagged in places as though the house itself were tired of standing. The windows were dark, black mirrors reflecting nothing but the gloom of the forest. The front door hung crooked on rusted hinges, creaking slightly with every gust of wind. I parked my car at the edge of the overgrown driveway, feeling an unease settle into my chest that I couldn't shake. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay. Dust coated every surface, disturbed only by the footprints I left as I explored. My boots echoed against the wooden floorboards, making it seem like the house was alive, listening to me, counting my steps. Cobwebs stretched across corners, glinting faintly in the beam of my flashlight. Old furniture sat in grotesque positions, covered in thick layers of dust, as though the previous owners had vanished suddenly, leaving their lives frozen in time. The wallpaper peeled like dead skin, curling from the walls, revealing mold-stained plaster beneath. Every corner seemed to hide shadows that were just a little too dark, moving slightly when I wasn't looking. I wandered through the main hall, my camera rolling, capturing everything for my channel. There was a grand staircase that spiraled upward into darkness, each step creaking ominously. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, its crystals dulled and clouded with grime. I ran my fingers over the railing, noting the chill that ran through the wood. It wasn't cold from neglect. It felt unnatural, like the temperature itself was alive, seeping into my bones. Then I saw them, footprints on the dust-covered floor, small bare feet leading toward the staircase. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. They weren't mine. I followed them with my flashlight, every nerve screaming at me to stop, to turn around. The last print ended halfway up the stairs, and there, just at the edge of my light, I saw movement. A pale figure darted behind the banister. My stomach twisted. The air around me went unnervingly still, the silence so thick it pressed against my ears. I shone the light again, but nothing was there. The footprints had vanished, leaving only the emptiness behind. I told myself it was a trick of my mind, exhaustion, maybe even fear magnifying every shadow. But the lodge had a presence, heavy, oppressive, and invisible. I could feel it pressing in on me from all sides. Despite that, I couldn't leave. Part of me wanted to keep exploring, to uncover the secrets this house had hidden for decades. Night fell, and I decided to stay inside for the first time. I set up my sleeping bag in the main hall, close to the fireplace that hadn't burned in years. Every creak and groan of the house made my heart leap, but I tried to tell myself it was just the old building settling. Then, at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, it happened. Slow, deliberate footsteps from the staircase above me, heavy, rhythmic, and impossible to ignore. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't alone. I didn't need to look up to know someone or something was pacing across the floor above. The steps stopped, and a faint dragging sound followed, like something being pulled across the floorboards. My body froze, paralyzed by terror, and when I finally lifted my eyes, I saw a shadow pass across the wall, human in shape but impossible in motion. I blinked, and it was gone. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that gnaws at your bones and makes the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that this house didn't just exist in the world of the living. It was a living nightmare, breathing and watching, and I had stepped inside its lungs. And then, from the darkness above, a whisper drifted down, soft and raspy, carrying no words I could understand, but a message I could feel. I was not welcome. I stayed frozen on the living room floor, my camera still recording, unsure if moving would make whatever was upstairs notice me more. The steps above didn't stop. They paced slowly, deliberately, back and forth, then paused at moments as if listening. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that exhaustion and fear were playing tricks on me, but the sound was real, too precise, too heavy to be anything else. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that stretched unnaturally along the walls, sometimes appearing closer than they should have been. Summoning every ounce of courage, I slowly stood, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. Each step toward the staircase made the old floorboards groan under my weight, and I flinched every time the echoes matched the rhythm of the footsteps above. I couldn't tell if they were following me or if the house itself was creating the sound, taunting me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The closer I got, the colder the air became, almost biting through my jacket. I reached the staircase and pointed my flashlight upward. The hall above was shrouded in darkness, each step leading into shadow. Dust floated down from the ceiling as if something had brushed against the floorboards. I took a deep breath and climbed slowly, gripping the railing, every nerve alert. When I reached the top, the hallway stretched far longer than I remembered from the photos online. Doors lined both sides, slightly ajar, some swinging gently as if breathing. Each room seemed to hum with the weight of forgotten memories, but I couldn't look inside. Not yet. The first door I approached was a bedroom. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and a cracked mirror leaned against the far wall. I shined the flashlight across it and froze. My reflection didn't move with me. I raised my hand. The image lagged for a heartbeat before mimicking my motion. My stomach twisted. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. The reflection stayed wrong. I stumbled back, nearly falling, and told myself I was losing it. It was impossible. Mirrors didn't work like that. And yet, I had seen it. Further down the hall, at the very end, a door stood closed. Something about it made my skin crawl, like it was holding its breath, waiting. The footprints I'd seen earlier, small, bare, leading upstairs, ended right at this door. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. A cold breeze whispered past me, brushing the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Only shadows, long and twisting in the flashlight's beam. Gathering my courage, I pushed the door open slowly. Deep scratch marks scored the plaster. Someone, or something, had tried to claw its way out. My hands shook as I moved closer, and then I saw it. A doll. It lay slumped on the floor next to the crib, porcelain cracked, one eye missing. For a moment I could swear it was watching me, its head tilted slightly. Against every instinct screaming to leave, I reached down to pick it up. The moment my fingers brushed the cold surface, I felt warmth. Not human warmth, but the sensation of something alive, recently held. A shiver ran down my spine, and I dropped the doll immediately. The air shifted. A sound rose behind me, a breath. Not loud, not a voice, but close enough to feel against my ear. I spun, heart hammering, but the room was empty. Only the doll lay there, lying in a position it hadn't been before. Its cracked face seemed different. Its remaining eye glinted in the flashlight's beam, reflecting something I couldn't name. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. The room pulsed with a quiet, oppressive energy, like it was aware of my presence and waiting to see what I would do next. I stepped back, trying to calm myself, to reason that dolls couldn't move on their own, that shadows played tricks on the mind in dim light. But then I saw it. The missing eye. It was back, and the doll was smiling. Not just a small, cracked smile, a full, knowing, cruel smile. Something dark and hungry hid behind that expression. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, darker than I remembered, and in the corner of my eye, the doll's shadow moved. I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. Even then, I knew I hadn't left the house. Ashgrove was far from done with me. Morning came, though it felt wrong. The sun outside barely pierced the heavy canopy of trees, casting the lodge in gray light that seemed unnatural. I wanted to leave immediately, to get back to the safety of the world outside, but something held me there. A pull I couldn't name, a curiosity I knew was dangerous. I checked my backpack and my pockets. My car keys were gone. I searched the living room floor, the staircase, even the bedrooms I had passed through. Nothing. The realization hit me like a blow. The house didn't want me to leave. As I moved through the hallways, I noticed something I hadn't before. The walls themselves seemed different. Peeling wallpaper now revealed drawings in charcoal, faces, hundreds of them, etched directly into the plaster. They weren't childish doodles. Each face was detailed, eyes wide with terror, mouths frozen in silent screams. I swallowed hard. I stepped closer to examine them, and my stomach turned. One of the faces had a faint resemblance to me. My eyes widened, and I stumbled backward. No, it couldn't be. My mind was playing tricks. The house was playing tricks. I forced myself to keep moving, my flashlight casting long, shaking beams along the walls. The hallway stretched further than it should have. Doors I remembered passing earlier were now in different places. It was as if the building itself was reshaping around me. Each turn brought a new layer of unease, and every time I thought I was moving forward, I ended up back in the same room. The room with the doll. It was lying in the middle of the hallway this time. I hadn't brought it here. Its cracked face stared at me, one eye wide and glinting as if it held a secret it wasn't ready to share. I wanted to leave it alone, but I couldn't look away. It moved, just slightly, a tilt of its head. Then a soft tapping sound started behind me. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly at first, then growing faster. My heart pounded in rhythm with the noise, and every instinct screamed at me to run. I did. But every step I took, the hallway seemed to stretch longer. The doors seemed to rearrange themselves, and the charcoal faces on the walls shifted with every glance. The terror wasn't just in what I could see. It was in what I could feel. The house was alive, aware of me, shaping itself to trap me. I tried to breathe, tried to calm the panic rising in my chest, but my lungs burned, my head spun, and my vision blurred. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing it to end. When I opened them, the faces on the walls were smiling. Not the small, benign kind of smile, but a wide, cruel grin, all of them turning toward me with the same expression. My stomach dropped. I was surrounded. The hallway stretched endlessly, but the walls pressed closer, narrowing the space, forcing me to focus on the doll in the center. Its single eye now glimmered with intent. I felt heat from it again, not warmth, but a presence, like it was reaching for something inside me. I stumbled backward, my flashlight clattering onto the floor. The doll's shadow stretched across the walls, elongating unnaturally, moving as if it were alive. My mind screamed at me to pick up the flashlight, to stay calm, but I couldn't. The tapping behind me grew louder, turning into something like tiny footsteps, circling me, always just out of view. Every face on the wall was now watching me. Every drawn mouth seemed to whisper a warning I couldn't hear. I backed into a wall, my hands trembling, and I felt something brush past my leg. I jumped, heart leaping into my throat, but saw nothing. Just the doll, sitting perfectly in the beam of my flashlight, smiling. Its head tilted slowly, deliberately, watching me. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't find the door I had entered. My memory of the layout no longer matched what I was seeing. The lodge was a labyrinth, shifting around me, keeping me inside, testing me. Exhausted and terrified, I tried to close my eyes, to stop moving and pretend I wasn't here. But the doll's presence was unbearable. The warmth, or whatever it was, grew stronger, more invasive, as if it could feel my fear and feed from it. My mind raced, trying to find logic, some explanation, but the house refused reason. Time itself seemed broken. My watch had stopped hours ago, yet the sun had barely moved. I was trapped in a limbo where every second stretched into eternity. I finally gathered enough courage to step forward, away from the doll, down the hall. The tapping followed. Faster now. My flashlight flickered, and when I looked back, the doll wasn't on the floor anymore. It was standing upright just at the edge of the hallway, its cracked face inches from mine. It smiled wider, and I felt deep in my chest a recognition I didn't want. It knew me. I ran blindly, my foot hitting the wall, my heart hammering in my chest. I turned a corner, and the hallway stretched further than I thought possible. Every drawn face on the wall was now staring at me, every eye burning into mine. I realized in that moment the lodge wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had chosen me as its next secret. I didn't stop running. The hallways of Ashgrove House had become a maze that defied reason. Doors led to rooms that didn't exist before, staircases curved impossibly, and the walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with each step I took. I could hear the doll following me, the soft tapping of its tiny feet, or whatever it was, matching my own frantic pace. The air had grown heavier, damp and suffocating, filling my lungs with the smell of rot and decay. I stumbled into what I thought was a living room, but it wasn't. The space stretched infinitely, walls covered in mold and blackened water stains. Old furniture was scattered, broken, and some pieces had deep scratches across their surfaces. The floorboards groaned under my weight, and I realized the sound was no longer echoing, it was responding. Every step I took seemed amplified, mirrored, and followed by another that wasn't mine. Something about the room drew me to the far corner. There was a wooden door, heavy and reinforced with iron locks. Oddly, the locks were undone, swinging slightly as if inviting me in. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach, but a force I couldn't name pulled me forward. The temperature dropped, my breath fogging in the air, and I had to remind myself to keep moving. I pushed the door open, revealing a basement unlike any I had seen in a house. The ceiling was low, the air wet and cold, and the walls were covered with mold and mildew that clung like shadows. The only light came from my flashlight, which cut through the darkness in narrow beams that revealed the horrors hidden within. Toys littered the floor, old, rusted, broken. Dolls with missing limbs, stuffed animals torn open, marbles rolling silently across the ground. It was a graveyard of childhood, a place that shouldn't exist in a house as old as this. At the far end of the basement, a small wooden chair sat facing the wall. I noticed photos scattered on the floor nearby, curling at the edges with age. I bent down to pick one up, and my stomach sank. They were photographs of people standing in front of Ashgrove House, spanning decades. Each face smiled, seemingly ordinary at first, but the closer I looked, the more I realized the smiles were wrong. There was something hollow in their eyes, something that made them appear empty, as though their souls had been drained. I flipped through the photos in a trembling hand, and then I froze. One picture made my blood run cold. It was me. I was standing there in the middle of the driveway, smiling at the camera exactly as I had entered the lodge. I dropped the photo and stumbled backward, my heart hammering. This wasn't possible. I hadn't been photographed, I hadn't even told anyone I was coming here. And yet there I was, smiling, frozen in a memory I hadn't lived. A creak echoed behind me. My head snapped around. The wooden chair was empty. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself I was imagining things. But then the doll appeared, sitting upright in the chair, its single remaining eye glinting in the beam of my flashlight. Its cracked face twisted into that same cruel, knowing smile. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. It was as if the doll had taken control of the floor itself, pinning me in place. The air grew thick, almost viscous, pressing against my skin and making it hard to breathe. I realized, in a terrifying moment of clarity, that the house wasn't just haunted, it was sentient. It was aware of me, watching me, feeding on my fear. The doll was its avatar, a conduit for whatever dark presence lingered here. I could feel it in my chest, a pressure that tightened with every heartbeat, pushing me toward the chair, toward the photos, toward the inevitable. A sound rose behind me, soft at first, then louder. A lullaby. A child's voice, faint, sweet, yet wrong. It seemed to come from every corner of the basement at once, echoing off the walls, bouncing from one shadow to the next. My mind screamed at me to cover my ears, to leave, to run. But I couldn't move. The lullaby wrapped around me, tightening, binding me in place. I glanced back at the chair. The doll's head turned slowly, deliberately, tracking me. My eyes darted to the photos. Each one had shifted. Faces I had studied moments before now seemed alive, their hollow eyes moving, following me, their smiles widening. I felt a presence behind me, low to the ground, crawling along the floor. I didn't dare look, but I knew, somehow, that it was watching, waiting, learning. The doll's smile widened, impossibly, and I understood. This house didn't just trap you physically, it trapped you in your own fear, in your own mind. And whatever had taken these people before me was patient. It waited for the right moment, feeding on terror, until its victims were hollowed out, like the faces in the photos. I didn't know how long I stayed there, frozen and helpless. Every breath felt like fire in my lungs, and every second stretched endlessly. The basement seemed to pulse with the lullaby, the toys, the photos, and the doll's gaze, all converging into a single oppressive weight that crushed me. I realized that leaving Ashgrove House wasn't about finding a door or escaping the walls. It was about surviving whatever darkness had been waiting for me here. I don't remember how I made it out. One moment I was trapped in that basement, paralyzed by fear, and the next I was running through the woods, branches clawing at my face, roots tripping me, darkness pressing from every side. The trees seemed taller, denser, as if the forest itself had grown to keep me inside. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Something behind me whispered and shifted with every step, and I knew the doll, or whatever it had become, was following. I ran blindly until I stumbled onto the overgrown driveway. My car was there, keys in the ignition, doors unlocked, as if waiting for me all along. I threw myself inside, heart hammering, and slammed the door shut. The engine roared to life and I sped away, not daring to look back. The forest and Ashgrove House receded into the shadows, but the feeling of being watched never left me. The weight in my chest, the cold that had clung to my bones inside that house, it stayed. I drove for hours without stopping, through roads I didn't know until I finally reached a small town. The sun was high in the sky now, bright and almost painfully ordinary. I stopped at a gas station to catch my breath and glanced in the rearview mirror. My reflection made my blood run cold. I was smiling. Slowly, I realized I hadn't been smiling before. The corner of my mouth twitched upward, unnaturally, as if my body had betrayed me while I ran. I rubbed my face frantically. Nothing changed. At night, I tried to forget. I told myself it was over, that I had escaped. But Ashgrove had left a mark. My dreams were invaded by its hallways, its shifting walls, the doll's single eye watching me in the darkness. I woke up screaming more than once, drenched in sweat, only to see that same cruel smile reflected in the dark corners of my room. I thought I could burn the footage I had recorded, delete everything on my camera and laptop. But each file returned. Videos I didn't make, shots I didn't take. The footage was darker, shorter, and more disturbing each time. In one clip, I was nowhere to be seen. The camera filmed the hallways of Ashgrove House, empty and silent. At first glance, it looked harmless, but then the doll appeared. Sitting in the middle of the frame, cracked face glinting in dim light, its single eye focused on the camera as if it were aware of me watching. It tilted its head slightly, smiled, and I swear I felt it move in real life, standing in the corner of my room for just a fraction of a second before vanishing. I stopped going out. I stopped contacting people. Even the idea of light and noise was unbearable. Every shadow seemed to twist toward me. Every sound became distorted and threatening. Ashgrove wasn't just a place. It was inside me now. And the doll was patient. It waited, watching, feeding. Sometimes I caught glimpses of its shadow in my peripheral vision, always just out of reach, always closer than I expected. Then I noticed it in reflections everywhere. Not just mirrors, but windows, the screens of my devices. Always there, smiling, watching. And behind it, a figure I knew too well, my face pale and calm, smiling exactly the way I had in that photograph from the basement. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The reflection wasn't mine. It was something else, something that had taken my image and was using it to draw me back. I realized, finally, that the house never let go. Ashgrove doesn't just trap you inside its walls. It follows you anywhere, everywhere, until it finds a way to pull you back. And now, as I sit in my room typing this, I can feel it behind me again. My chest tightens, my breath catches, and in the corner of my eye I see the doll. Its single eye glints and it smiles. But there's something new, something worse. Behind it, another reflection, darker, smiling wider, and it looks just like me. I don't know if I'm still alive. I don't know if I ever will be. Ashgrove House is waiting always, and now so is it.